Welcome to Literacy Mindset, where education leaders from across the country share strategies for improving K-12 instruction today and preparing for the challenges of tomorrow. The stakes are high. Students are facing new academic demands, and educators are navigating an ever-changing educational landscape. Each episode, we explore the most effective literacy initiatives, innovative tools, and strategies that are reshaping education. Whether you're an educator looking to improve student outcomes or passionate about driving meaningful change in schools, the Literacy Mindset brings you the insights and strategies you need to stay ahead. This is where education leadership meets real-world impact.
All right, really excited to have another session, another episode of Literacy Mindset today, joined by Mr. Brian Latwis from Superintendent of Barnegat Township, and Sue Mayo, who he brings on as his expert right-hand person. She'll describe her specific role, but really excited to have both of you on today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to be able to talk about things that are going on in New Jersey and across the country relative to literacy. It's a big, important topic for us, and we like getting into that. So why don't you start us off by just orienting us a little bit to what you guys have been doing in Barnegat and what's going on right now in the district.
All right, so I'm Sue Mayo. I'm the supervisor of elementary, and we have recently reconfigured due to the fact that our NJSLA scores revealed that we had an area of need in our literacy, and we saw some gaps. So Dr. Latwis took the brave, bold move to reconfigure. So what we did is we went from K-5 to buildings now are pre-K, right? K-2 and 3 and 4. And it was much easier then for us to really target and to roll out some really nice initiatives based on the science of reading to help and support our kids. So that is really where we started. What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so this is my 7th year now as superintendent in the district. And I'm extremely fortunate to be surrounded by an incredible leadership team. Mm-hmm. So when you have that much talent, you try to look for that opportunity to how can you leverage everybody's expertise and bring them together to kind of forge our path as we go forward. So in the district, one of the staples that we've had, and that's really led to a lot of our decision making, has been a process we call the data harvest. Mm-hmm. So the data harvest, we go school by school. We're a pre-K to 12 district. We have 3,700 kids, a little over 3,700 kids. Giving you a little bit more of the demographic. We are still predominantly Caucasian, but we are becoming more diverse year after year. And we're about 40% free and reduced lunch. Okay. So when I first started in this position, we were about 35% proficiency in ELA and 35% proficiency in math. So basically what that told us was that 1 out of 3 of our students obviously was on grade level. And that was unacceptable. We wanted to do better for our students. We wanted to do better for our community. So we really started to delve into why that was. And, we looked at really every different aspect of the district from, just even the infrastructure of the district and what is, what needed to be addressed. We looked at, academics. We looked at, every facet of that. We looked at, obviously the elementaries is where you build your foundation. So one of the first things that we did was take advantage of the state's pre-K funding. And we were very aggressive with that. So currently, as we sit here right now, we have almost 80% of our universe. So what the state projects to be our amount of 3 and 4 year olds in the district, we have about 80% of them in our program. And then they funnel into our K-12 educational journey here. Sue had mentioned the reconfiguration. One of the primary reasons for that was a couple different things. Obviously, it was we wanted to improve the academics. We wanted to improve the quality of the education that our students got. And one of the ways that we were able to do that was slowing down the game, if you will. So if you have a building that is K-2, your basic skills instructors have to become experts in interventions for kindergartners, first and second. The previous model of K-5, you'd obviously have to have an expertise in 6 different grades. And, what's an issue for a kindergartner is not an issue for a third grader or vice versa.
Right.
So, it was a tall ask. So by reconfiguring and going in that direction, it allowed us to really hone in on where our students' struggles were. And as we were able to bring aboard resources and stuff, it became way more financially sound and responsible, because now you're purchasing it for 1 building, you're not purchasing it for 4 buildings. So it allowed us to really improve the level of resource that we had in the district for our students, because it became a lot more cost effective when you were talking about purchasing it for 1 building as opposed to 4. Part of that reconfiguration also allowed us to run our sections more equitable. So it allowed us to really stay in that mid-20s and per grade. But because we housed them all in 1 building, it was a perfect, division. So if you have 250 students, we knew that we were running 10 sections, 25 kids each. And what was nice about that was it freed up about 13 staff members in the district. So those 13 staff members became instructional coaches. They became additional electives at the high school. They became a foreign language teacher at the elementaries, which we didn't have. It helped us double our gifted and talented program and have 2 instructors doing that. So it provided a lot more opportunity for our high achieving students. Really that was one of the first things that we did that allowed us to do a lot of things after that. So, we could go on and on. There's a lot.
Yeah, no, we will.
I want you to get to a second question, so I feel bad. I don't want to take up the entire time on the first question.
But I do want to add to that, though.
Okay, go ahead.
I was one of those instructional coaches that was hired. And in my role, I worked very closely with the teachers. And what we found working with them is that they needed some education on what literacy really meant and what did our teachers need. They needed some training. So we started training them on science of reading. So then I was looking into, I need to train myself on more of this as well. So then I went back to get my master's in reading because I wanted to be able to support our teachers more. And so with that, then we were doing a lot of professional development on this for our teachers, so that our teachers felt more comfortable in what is the components of literacy and what do each building need to focus more on. So that really helped us to target more in K2. We're going to focus more on the foundations of phonological and phonics, versus in our 3-4 building, maybe we want to focus more on the vocabulary, getting into that comprehension more.
Okay.
So that was really helpful in my role now as a supervisor, where I was that coach and I was really working closely with those teachers. So then when we purchased our new reading series, we really knew what we needed because I was in the trenches with those teachers.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Lots to digest there.
One question.
We're gonna unpack that. We're going to unpack that a little bit. Obviously, we're going to talk about a data harvest a little bit more. That sounds interesting. Clearly want to understand, as you think about literacy initiatives and the relationship to the buildings. I loved some of the commentary on that. Let's take a step back for a second, and let's look at reading. Sue, I loved what you just said. You went back, got even more education on it. I have sort of a basic question that I like to ask at times. Why is learning to read so hard? Like, what is it about reading that maybe isn't well understood at times that you can have 30% proficiency, because it just happens that way? Like, why don't we naturally learn to read more easily?
I think because I know for myself, when I went to school to be a teacher, I don't feel that there were enough classes in teaching teachers the components of literacy and those foundations and how important they are. And so I felt like in our district, we were skipping that piece. We were diving into comprehension and unpacking what that looks like for even our kindergarten students, but not providing a strategic phonics program that really helped them to identify, segment, and blend and do all those things that they need to do to decode in order to get to that comprehension. And I think teachers needed to get more education on that for themselves. They were skipping pieces of the reading components that our kids need to have in order to get to that piece of comprehending a story. So I think that's where we saw in our district that our teachers needed that support.
Okay.
So that's why we did a lot of training with that. Is that making sense?
Yeah. Is it fair to say at times then that because language is around us as you grow up, right, and you speak the English language far before you read it, right? Um, and with math and science, it sort of is very intuitive that like you need to be taught how to, add and subtract, because there's nothing really that you're doing in your everyday life that necessarily would assume that everybody would think you know how to do that. But since you're talking to me, right, there's some assumption that English should be more intuitive, and so we miss out on the direct instruction componentry that might have to exist on that. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Absolutely. I think that that's exactly what I feel like was happening. We're missing the piece of actually teaching how to decode and how for our students to be able to get to that. And that's, I think, even across the board nationally, we were seeing that. So that's why I think when the science of reading started to really being pushed out, they started to see like that's the necessary piece, those foundations, and we were all skipping that. And I feel like that's why we had this nationally issue with our students not being able to read, because we didn't give them the tools they needed in order to build on that. So we are seeing how important it is for our students to have those foundations, phonological awareness, being able to separate sounds, being able to blend sounds together, being able to segment them. Those are areas that I don't think we were really addressing that needed to be.
Got it. So you Brian, you sort of structurally put some things in place by grouping grade levels. You talked about that a little bit, which certainly helps in identifying the skills that are required. What happens when, let's say, in 5th and 6th grade, you still have students that are maybe multiple grade levels below, and now you definitely have teachers that aren't necessarily versed in teaching phoneme segmentation across the board? How do you provide the right level of support for those teachers to make that available to them?
Yeah. So we're trying to do the same thing. So I'm working now closely with our new supervisor for secondary, the ELA, and she needs to do the same thing to train those teachers, because you are going to have students who have those gaps. So you have to, what are we going to do to address those gaps? We can't just ignore that they're going to need that decoding piece, and we have to train that teacher to help that student. So we would do the same thing we would do in our elementary. We would provide some assessments to find the area that they're missing that we can then target with some interventions. And we'd either do that through our BSI program, which then they would get some pull-out resource with a teacher who would be more trained in that area, or the coach in that secondary, which is our 5th grade is in a secondary model here, would get the coach to help that teacher to provide some interventions that might come from us in elementary to help that teacher to give more support.
And to kind of piggyback on that, it is a challenge. You look at the difference a lot of times when you talk to an elementary or a primary teacher versus a secondary teacher. And if you ask them, like, what do you teach? A lot of times elementary teachers will say kids. And when you talk to secondary and you say, like, what do you teach? They'll say chemistry.
Right.
And so, part of where you go with that is you have to kind of establish that sense of urgency, and you have to establish the why. So, we have our star reading assessments don't just end at 2nd grade. We continue to utilize them throughout the upper grades and whatnot. And getting a Lexile level for a student in your 10th grade classroom, and you realize that like half your class is not reading on that level, it opens up your eyes to say, well, how do I bridge that gap? And then, teachers we find a lot of our teachers are very receptive to then asking for that assistance from the instructional coaches and saying, like, what are some strategies I can utilize here? What are some resources I can utilize here to help kind of bridge that gap? Because every teacher wants to have success, right? Every teacher wants to feel like they walked away and that their kids understood the material, they understood the content, they're able to apply that. They want to feel like a lot of that hard work that they put into it, reaps that benefit or that reward of their students walking away successful. So, a big piece of that is opening up the eyes to the fact that, when Brian's not as engaged in the classroom, it's not maybe because Brian doesn't care about academics or doesn't care about getting a good education or doesn't care about ELA or whatever. It might be because Brian doesn't know what you're talking about, and Brian's struggling to read, and it's really hard. I mean, if we could take a step back for a second, I mean, think about how challenging this is for teachers nowadays, right? And teaching was always a difficult profession, but I will tell you, it is infinitely harder now than I think it has ever been at any other point. So, you're a kindergarten teacher, you have your set of standards where you have to start and you have to work your way through that.
Right.
And you inherit, 22, 23, 24, 25 students that are completely, very possibly on all different levels and all different, starting points. And you're expected to then differentiate your instruction and bring these kids along and get them to buy into doing the hard work and getting them to learn the necessary skill sets that they need. Have a good experience, enjoy being in your classroom, but also willing to put into work. And one of the things that, we see nowadays with, the smartphones and all the technology, which is a gift and a curse, is we have absolutely become an immediate gratification society. So, I think about like when the days, and I can't feel like I'm dating myself now. It's like, I remember the days of dial-up, and I would like download a song and it would take 20 minutes and you were happy it took you 20 minutes. If I go to listen to a song on my iTunes right now and it doesn't play immediately, I'm ready to throw my phone out the window. And, our students, like our kids are coming into, kindergarten, having technology and having different things like that they engage with and wanting that immediate gratification. And you talk about that science of reading, it's hard. It's hard work. It's not easy. So getting a student to buy into putting in that work and getting to see the relevancy and all that other stuff is just another challenge that gets kind of added onto it. So Sue and I have talked about this a number of times. We have so much respect for the teaching profession and for the teachers that we have here. And we are so grateful to have an amazing staff and to have a lot of teachers that, buy into this and roll up their sleeves and want to get to work and they're willing to put in the work, and they're good role models for our kids, putting in that work. But it's a challenge. I mean, it is a hard, difficult profession. And
we've had so many teachers recently going back for their masters in reading because they are so interested in doing what's best for their kids, but interested to find out like what is it that I need to know about reading,
right?
Because there's so many pieces of it. I feel like new students coming out of college still don't know and don't have those background skills that they need.
No. Wow, there's so many things there that I want to kind of dive into and unpack a little bit, but let's absolutely take a second and acknowledge that teaching today is not the same. And it is a very, very tough profession. Kids growing up on iPads, dealing with distractions that are crazy. So I hope that we can get a little time to pull on the technology thread, because I'm fascinated by that. But I do want to talk a little bit about sort of strategically how you guys think about blending programs, right, that become useful tools. You mentioned STAR, you mentioned other programs that maybe are used in that, versus structure, time in the day, like personnel. Like how do you leverage programs as helpful tools? How do you recognize when it's overwhelming? Like, are there things that you can kind of talk about relative to maybe a literacy initiative, or you do need to decide on some programs? You talked about, rolling out a new reading curriculum. Maybe just talk us through that a little bit.
So when we first started, when we realized that we needed to do something because we saw a gap in our literacy, we were throwing everything out there. We had at least 5 online programs, especially during COVID.
And it was the time when it was easier to do that, right?
But then we kept some of those programs, but we started to feel like we were just fatiguing our students and we're throwing them online. And then our teachers started to feel like, well, what do you need me for? So we had to find a better balance for that. So we really looked into a lot of these programs to see, well, are they backed by research? Are they backing science of reading? Are they are they on the same vision that we have for our staff and students? So we were able to weed out some of those unnecessary programs. The reading program that we purchased it really provided a lot of resources for our students. And one of those resources is an online component that is more geared for each individual student. So it's a diagnostic, and then it will, be adaptive for each child. And so then they can go on that program daily in order to shrink the gaps for them.
Nice.
So, and it provides us with a lot of information for the teacher to be able to look at and then to intervene at times if they need to. So we were able to use just this program now, but we then have some other programs that we use just for benchmarks.
Okay.
So our reading series itself gives us a diagnostic, then it gives us an online component for the students. Then we use our STAR reading for another measure for progress monitoring on our reading abilities. And then we use in our 3-4 building, we use a Linkit benchmark that mimics NJSLA so that we can get an idea of how our students might be doing on our big standardized test that we get.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think it's a simple answer in the sense of listening. You have to listen to the different stakeholder groups. I'm sure there's probably at times teachers that are like they're not listening to us, but we always are. Our structure where we have our supervisors meet with their various departments or grades each month provides a more intimate setting for that feedback. We obviously have a district level advisory group where we have different stakeholder groups. I run a superintendent advisory council where I have different people from the different buildings and different departments there. We have a student advisory group in each one of the buildings all the way down to pre-K where those kids come in and tell you what they like or they don't like. So we try to listen as best as we can. When I first started in this role, it's I wouldn't say my personality is different now in the sense of I want everything done yesterday. Sure. We inherited, a lot of challenges and roadblocks, 7 years ago, and we wanted to fix them all overnight. So, we did a lot, right? We did a lot in the very beginning, as far as trying to put a lot of these pieces in place. And, when we threw all this stuff out there and we were supporting the teachers and we were supporting the admin and trying to work through all this stuff, to what Sue just said, and it really boiled down to listening. We were getting feedback from staff, we were getting feedback, from the students, and, it allowed us to try to refine some of the things that we utilize. But again, going back to that data harvest, and through our budgeting cycle, we really track pretty much everything that we do in this district. We're able to track it and see if we have success, see if we're not having success. We believe firmly in being fiscally responsible. We want to try to squeeze everything we can out of, every cent that we get. We recognize that taxes in New Jersey are high. So, we want to make sure that there's nothing that we do where we're just kind of throwing it out there and just hoping for the best. Everything that we do is tracked. We see if we have success with it. We keep the things we do. We move away from the things that we don't. And I think one of the real compliments of the leadership team is I think that everybody leaves their ego at the door. So yes, we try a lot of things. We've tried a lot of plans. Some of them worked great. Some of them have not worked so well. Resources that we thought were going to be amazing weren't. Resources that we were kind of like, all right, let's give it a shot. Turned out to be amazing. And, at the end of the day, we look at everything and we try to let the data drive a lot of our decision making. Not completely, because we don't want to remove away that gut instinct or that intuitiveness or that experience. We want to blend that in, but we do look at a lot of the data. We look at the numbers and we hold on to the things that are having success, and they might have had success at one point and now they're not, so we move away, and that's fine. We keep it as fluid as possible. So I think, like I said, I think it really boils down to listening. Even when people don't think you're listening, we're always listening, and we are taking that feedback and we are considering it, and we do, let that guide a lot of our decision making.
Okay. Let's drill down a little bit more on the data harvest. First of all, who decided to call it a data harvest, and how was that received around it? Like, it seems like a fascinating concept to me that you have been able to put forward this idea of data proficiency is an important part of what we do. Like, there is data, we've got to know about it, and you've turned it into, you just talked about, we collect everything that we do. Sometimes people see that as a really creepy thing, right? It's like, whoa, my gosh, like everything is tracked. But the way you said it, I was like, that's awesome. That sounds amazing. It sounds great. So how do you, just walk us through conceptually, how does a data harvest become sort of a key cornerstone of your leadership in a way that people are encouraged by it, not put off by it?
So I will tell you a funny story, and this is where you have to leave the ego at the door. When we first were coming up with this name, I had thrown out there, we should do a data dump. We're going to do, you hear that all the time in technology and stuff like that. We're like, oh, we're dumping that off our phones. We're dumping, So I was like, oh, we'll do a data dump. And somebody was like, do you think we can move away from the word dump and maybe we want to harvest our data and we could grow? So that was an example of one of the members of our leadership team. I believe that was our director of curriculum. Jim was like, maybe we go with harvest because we're growing. And I was like, all right, fine, we'll go with harvest, and we're going. But this went back to there was some completely nothing to do with education. It was called the CompStat model, and it was utilized by NYPD years and years ago.
Okay.
And it was in Rudy Giuliani's, one of his early on books about leadership. And the idea was that all the heads of the different districts and precincts had to go down in front of all their peers and be able to own their data. If the murder rate increased, if robberies increased, they had to talk about that and talk about what their plans were going to be to fix it. So we really like that idea of that transparency. We like that idea of owning whatever your situation is. We're a big fan of the quote of we have a problem. You are not the problem, but we have a problem. So we try to pull that away from anybody feeling like this is an attack or anything like that.
Right.
This is meant to be honesty, and let's have honest conversations about the things that are going well and the things that are not. And principals end up being the tip of the spear for that when we present this out in public session during our Board of Ed meetings, or we present this out during the data harvest when it's more intimate with just the leadership team. Principals are ultimately the ones that own whatever's going on in their buildings.
Okay.
And one of the neat things about it is everybody is there. So every member of the leadership team is there. And we have this kind of a mindset of you do, we do, I do approach. So, if somebody is sitting there and somebody brings forward an initiative, it's done at that meeting. So the mindset is that everybody's in the room to hear it. There's never that situation where somebody just comes to my office privately and is like, hey, I want to go in this direction. And I'm like, all right, rock and roll, charge the hill. We do this as a leadership team together. And that affords everybody the opportunity to talk about what they can do to further initiative, what they can do to help the initiative. They might say, hey, were you aware that if you do this, you might get this reaction? So it allows us to kind of have these conversations where, in the room, yes, principal's tip of the spear, the data harvest, but when we're in the room, nobody has a title. It's meant to just be if you have an idea, throw it out there. So we might get our director of special ed that's giving an idea on something that's elementary literacy that maybe is not necessarily his lane per se, but he's giving that idea because in that room, all of us, the collective is smarter than any individual. So, we look at everything. We look at HIB data, we look at discipline data, we look at staff attendance, student attendance, we look at any kind of discipline trends, we look at everything you could think of from academics, boil down to which standards are going well and which standards we're not seeing the success that we thought we were going to see on it. We drill down everything, and then we come up with actionable steps. So it's never a situation in which we walk out of there without a plan. We walk out of there, everybody walks out of there, singing off the same sheet of music of the 3 or 4 things that we're going to try to implement to correct some of the things that we're seeing that we don't like. And then when we're away from those data harvests, each building is running like their own mini data harvest. So, what's really cool is we'll have principals and supervisors meeting with individual teachers to look at their classroom, what's working, what's not working. We're linking teachers that had success in one area to a teacher that maybe didn't have success in that area. So it provides that peer coaching opportunity for them to work with each other. So that mindset, that concept of like looking at all these different things constantly and trying to, make adjustments to, as we're going through it, and hoping for that better outcome at the end, that's kind of the model that's in place. So we have these data harvests happen 3 times a year, beginning, middle, end. But that concept, that model is then carried forward from, the principal and the leadership team, all through that maybe 10, 12 weeks between sitting down on a more larger scale, with the superintendent, directors, and things like that. So,
got it. Okay. Well, on that same thread, then, how much does technology play a role in that? Not just the data harvest, but like how you think about what you're doing, and how much of it is a stop with focusing on the technology. There's other things here, and, sort of that blend of benefit and distraction that technology can be.
Yeah, so I can answer to that.
Please.
I feel, well, first of all of our assessments are online. So
Okay.
the technology is that
Good.
component.
Brass tacks. Let's talk through that. Okay.
So again, we use Linkit, iReady, and STAR. And then my role with my instructional coach, we then look and, move through all that data and review it. And then I'll share it with the principals and then the teachers. But that data then is going to give that teacher now some areas that she maybe needs to do more lessons on, and she now needs to do some small groups or create some centers. So we're using that technology to provide our teachers a resource to build some lessons. And then my role as a supervisor is to help them build those lessons and find other resources, or using the technology to create lessons so that they can, implement into their classrooms.
From a leadership perspective, it's really unfair to have an expectation and then not provide people with the resources to try to meet that expectation. Mm-hmm. So, we talked about before, teaching is unbelievably challenging. It's unbelievably difficult to do. And if you do it right, it takes hours and hours outside of your classroom, to put something forth. There's that old adage that the planning should exhaust the teacher and the lesson should exhaust the students. Mm-hmm. So that's the mindset. So the idea of, if we're going to expect differentiation, if we're going to expect that small group instruction, if we're going to expect that individualized instruction, if we're going to use these awesome platforms like Linkit or STAR or iReady to provide these amazing, breakdowns of what our students know and don't know, it would be really unfair for us to walk away from the teacher and be like, you got this? Awesome. We're out. Mm-hmm. So, as a district and as a board of education, that's where, the support comes in with making sure that we have the financial resources to be able to put forth these different platforms and stuff like that, so that the teachers do have the resources to make differentiation something that is attainable and that they can do, right, versus not. So we are a one-to-one initiative all the way down to kindergarten. Okay. Our K-6 student population does not take the devices home. They're held in laptop carts in the room, but okay, each student has their own assigned to them. And then grades 7 through 12, they do take them home. Okay. And they are permitted to use them, and they're the gateway to those different resources when they're not using them inside the school, and then they're obviously an educational tool inside the classroom. But as far as our goal with the teachers is that it is used as a resource. It's not used as like the primary function. There's nothing that we could do in this laptop that would replace the teacher in the front of the room. So the teacher is still the one that's the maestro conducting their lesson and running through it, and the technology is seen, I believe, as a resource where the students can utilize that. So the teacher can effectively work with all 25 kids, even if they're maybe only working with 7 directly in front of them. Everybody's engaged, everybody's doing, is working on something that's kind of furthering their academic journey.
Right. So the reading series that we purchased has a component called My Path. And so the students are required to go on about 10 minutes a day. Got it. So and that's math and ELA, so it would be 20 minutes whole. Mm-hmm. So we really don't like them going on more than that, because then we find it's just now they're just playing games and they're not building up a good stamina that we need them to build for reading purposes. So that's really what we try to encourage in our classrooms. Not a lot of screen time. We want more teacher direction time. Mm-hmm. So the balance, it has to be a good balance.
Okay, excellent. Well, goodness, guys, we could talk about this stuff forever. There's a lot of different threads. Maybe we'll have it back another time and dive into some of these topics deeper. But we probably spent a good amount of time today. But I can't let you go without sort of my favorite crystal ball question on this. You've seen a lot happen in the last 7 years, and you can really reflect on what you've done, Dr. Latwis, since you've been there. But what does it look like going forward? If you project forward another 5-7 years, do you see trends continuing? Maybe something that's stopped and new thing comes on? Just kind of help us see the future a little bit.
Sure. So, it's the future is very bright. Everything that we've seen over the last few years, even having battled the COVID shutdowns for the 2 years and whatnot, we are super optimistic and excited about the trends that we're seeing and the data that we're seeing. We have an incredible staff. We have an incredible, top to bottom, everybody plays a role in the students' academics, from the custodians and secretaries, guidance counselors, CST, teachers, instructional coaches, leadership, board of ed. Everybody has to come together and to formulate that. And the cool thing about the data harvest that I was, referencing a few times is that really has guided our future. So if you ask me what I see going forward, I think I see, a really bright future. I think I see our continued success that we're seeing at the elementaries continue to cycle through and reverberate through the district. Each of the buildings, from high school, middle school, we have seen things that we can look at and say, like, wow, this is really working and this is super exciting. And the leadership team and the staff can walk away from it feeling like, wow, we're moving in a good direction and we're seeing a lot of positive outcomes. We continue to look for opportunities for our students, so it was a big focus of our secondary level. And we were super excited. We had middle states come in this year to start to do the evaluation process, and we haven't gotten officially accredited yet. But when they were walking out, they direct quote was, "It was a flawless site visit." So that's our high school, and you go all the way down to our pre-K, where the second evaluation cycle through, we continue to be maintained as a 4-star quality rated pre-K program. And there's accolades that can be pointed to all throughout, our different buildings. That we can go on and on about, that we are super unbelievably proud of. And again, that's every stakeholder in this group that comes together, in this district that comes together to make that happen. So looking in the future, I think we're going to continue on doing the things that we're doing right now. And we're at a point now where I feel like we're making minor adjustments. We're attacking everything with a scalpel, not an axe. We continue to have a plan, like this, like your golf game, right? Like, I'm not very good at golf, so when I go out there and have a good shot, I have no idea how that happened, so I can't replicate it. But in a district where we have these actionable steps and we have these plans, we can look back and we can identify the areas where things are working. We want to continue to double down on that, and areas where we still see challenges, and we attack those things, and we continue to do that and continue to bite it off in digestible chunks. And I think as a result, we continue to see every year we continue to get better than we were the year before. So it's really, really exciting. Super excited to be a part of it. Super excited to be surrounded with the people that I'm surrounded with. Because again, this none of this would be possible without being, having a strong team around me, and without having the staff, in this district that we do. We call it a Barnegat family. I say that all the time. I mean that. Doesn't mean we always agree on everything, as any family does and doesn't,
Sure.
but we have an incredible group of people here that are dedicated and passionate. And, like I said, I think that's been reflective in the trajectory that we've seen over the last few years. And I'm super excited to see kind of where we end up.
Oh, that's great. Well, I appreciate both of you spending a little bit of time with me today and giving us some insight into the Barnegat family that is doing some great things and will continue into the future. Thanks a bunch for your time.
Thank you
Thanks
so much
so
for
much.
having us. This was really a
Thank
fun
you.
experience. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. If you found today's conversation insightful, be sure to subscribe to Literacy Mindset. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube for updates, resources, and to join the conversation. Have a topic you'd like us to explore? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time.